Fluorescent lights hummed like distant thunder in the empty corridor, casting long shadows that danced at the edge of my weary vision as I leaned against the cold wall, fighting exhaustion after another grueling night in the ER. The air carried a sterile tang of antiseptic and regret, clinging to my scrubs like a second skin, while distant monitor beeps sounded through the halls, a relentless reminder of lives hanging in fragile balance. For years, I'd navigated this chaos with steady hands amid trauma and urgency, but lately, the weight pressed heavier, blurring external shadows with those creeping into my thoughts. In quiet hours, when the hospital felt like a forgotten relic rather than a beacon of healing, I'd stare into the dim reflections of grimy windows, wondering if isolation was unraveling me, one sleepless shift at a time. My name is Damien Thorne. I'm a 35-year-old emergency room physician at St. Oakley's Hospital in a quiet suburban town. For 8 years, I've held it together during chaotic night shifts, trauma cases rolling in, hearts stopping, lives slipping through my fingers. It's high stress, sure, but I've always managed. Lately, though, things feel off. Patients linger in recovery longer than expected, defying medical logic. Staff murmur about unnatural shadows in the halls, but I chalk it up to chronic fatigue. Overwork does that, makes you see things that aren't there. St. Oakley's is a 1950s relic, with dimly lit corridors and outdated equipment that glitches at the worst moments. The hospital has a history of mysterious patient disappearances, always dismissed as administrative errors. Understaffed, especially at night, it becomes an eerie ghost town, leaving you alone with the beeps and moans. I live 2 blocks away in a modest apartment, with no family or distractions, just me and my career. But recurring nightmares plague me, blank, staring faces that jolt me awake in a cold sweat. They symbolize my deepest fear, losing control in a job where every decision means life or death. It began on a routine night shift with Mr. Harlan, a 68-year-old terminal cancer patient. His vitals were stable, but he suddenly coded cardiac arrest. I tried to resuscitate him, but he was gone. As I pronounced him dead and prepped the body, I glanced down the hall and saw it. A tall, slender figure, pale and featureless, clad in a patient's gown. It moved stiffly, like a marionette jerked by invisible strings. I blinked, blamed the flickering fluorescence, and moved on. But the next morning, while reviewing his death certificate, the post-mortem photo stopped me cold. His face was twisted in anguish, nothing like the peaceful passing I'd witnessed. It didn't match. I shook my head, filed it away, but the unease lingered. Back at work, I tried to bury myself in the routine, administering meds, checking vitals, the usual grind, but the figure appeared more frequently. I'd glimpse it in window reflections or standing motionless in empty exam rooms. It never interacted, just watched, especially the dying patients, drawn to their vulnerability like a moth to a flame. The first direct sighting hit hard. I was with Mrs. Rivera, 52, comatose from end-stage heart failure. Her breathing was labored, her end near. I heard a faint shuffle behind the curtain. There it was, beside her bed, its blank face tilting as if studying her. As she took her last gasp, the figure's smooth surface rippled, absorbing the contorted agony of her face. I froze, horrified. Then I blinked, and it vanished. But her body looked unnaturally serene now, all traces of suffering erased, as if it had stolen her final expression. Shaken, I confided in Nurse Lucy Grant, a no-nonsense 40-year-old who'd been here for 15 years. She laughed at first, dismissing it as fatigue, but admitted she'd felt watched during her shifts too. That spurred me to dig deeper. After hours, I slipped into the admin office and pored over records. A chilling pattern emerged. Over the past year, morgue photos showed mismatched expressions, joyful smiles on suicide victims, terror on the faces of peacefully departed elderly. It wasn't right. The sightings invaded my off hours. One night, while brushing my teeth, I spotted it in my bathroom mirror, mimicking my slumped posture. Insomnia gripped me tightly, sleep elusive. I ran a blood test on myself. It ruled out drugs, illness, or hallucinations. This was real. I had to face it. Driven by dread and curiosity, I snuck into the hospital archives at night, my badge slipping me past security. Old blueprints revealed hidden sub-basements from World War II, used for experimental treatments. Faded logs described tests on medical mannequins for surgical practice. One entry chilled me. A botched procedure in the 1940s, transferring a dying soldier's neural patterns to a mannequin to preserve consciousness. It went wrong, creating an anomaly. The figure now targeted my patients. During a code blue for a 25-year-old car crash victim, it stood at the foot of the bed, contorting to mirror his convulsions. We defibrillated and fought desperately, but he died. The entity absorbed his wide-eyed shock, leaving the body with a blank, featureless face, just like its own. I teamed up with Lucy after she confessed she'd seen it too and wanted to help protect everyone. But Dr. Hudson Vance, the 55-year-old admin, a real bureaucrat obsessed with reputation, warned me off. "Rumors could get you suspended," he said. Patients in my ward began dying faster, their expressions stolen. The morgue turned into a nightmare gallery. Smiles on the anguished, grimaces on the calm, talk of a curse spread. The horror got personal. The entity mimicked Lucy in the break room, faceless, yet absorbing her laugh before vanishing. Later, I found her alive, but her expression seemed off, as if part of her spark had vanished. It isolated me, amplifying my fear of losing people. Piecing together the evidence, I realized it wasn't killing. It fed on the emotional essence of deaths, collecting anguished expressions to grow stronger and blend in. It cornered me in a stalled elevator, its face inches from mine, transmitting visions of twisted deaths. I relived those stolen final moments, gasping for air as the doors finally opened. Rumors exploded. A young nurse quit after witnessing it absorb a child's smile in pediatrics. The entity multiplied, manifesting in various wings, mimicking staff to sow confusion. even posing as patients who revealed their true nature mid-treatment. Vance accused me of hysteria and put me on probation, isolating me from my duties. Alone, I locked myself in an isolation room with a dying palliative patient. I watched it absorb her mix of relief and regret, its form becoming more human-like as faint eyes and mouths emerged from stolen features. It invaded my home, mimicking my form in the kitchen window, preparing coffee without a face. Blackouts struck, rousing me with implanted memories of others' deaths, as if it were embedding these horrors to break me. Desperate, I considered euthanizing a terminal patient with morphine to lure it, but I couldn't. The temptation eroded my ethics, the healer's code. Instead, I documented everything in a hidden journal, planning to expose it if I survived. The hospital went into lockdown, blaming a contagion, but I knew it was the entity's power expanding. Patients died en masse, their faces twisted into viral grins. Armed with a scalpel and flashlight, I descended to the sub-basement, seeking its origin. A cracked chamber holding the original mannequin remnants. It pursued me through dark, labyrinthine halls. Its body was a grotesque mosaic. Laughing mouths, screaming eyes, shifting to disorient. It mimicked my voice, calling in stolen tones of dead patients, dredging up my guilt over failures. Cornered in the chamber, I realized destruction required overload, not brute force. I injected a sedative to feign near death, luring it closer. As it leaned in for my defiant expression, I thrust a handheld mirror at it, forcing self-reflection. The sensory overload struck. It fractured. Visions flooded me, hundreds of stolen deaths and chaotic flashes. The entity writhed, dissolving into a swarm of floating, screaming expressions that dissipated into nothingness. I awoke in a hospital bed, disoriented, but alive. The presence had vanished. The atmosphere returned to normal. The photos reverted to their true states as if the absorptions had been undone. Lucy confirmed that the sightings had stopped, but scars remained, faint impressions on my skin, visible only in mirrors. Vance apologized, attributing it to collective delusion from stress, and offered us leave. I resigned and moved to a rural clinic, seeking quiet. The sub-basement was sealed off as a hazard. In the quiet hours, when the clinic felt more like a forgotten relic than a beacon of healing, I'd catch myself staring into the dim reflections of grimy windows, no longer wondering if isolation was unraveling me. It had, and something more had woven itself into my being. The entity, born from desperate wartime experiments to defy death, wasn't a monster, but a tragic echo of our own mortality, feeding on the final expressions that defined us, mirroring fears I'd long buried in the frenzy of saving lives. By forcing it to confront its fractured self in that mirror, I'd shattered its form, dispersing it into the ether and restoring the stolen faces to their rightful peace. The clinic normalized, the deaths reverted to their honest truths, and I escaped with my life, resigning to this quieter existence, sealing away the sub-basement's horrors as a mere hazard. Yet, victory came at a cost. Months later, on a routine errand in the sleepy town square, I glimpsed a fleeting featureless figure in the distant crowd, vanishing before I could pursue it. Proof that it wasn't destroyed, only scattered, awaiting a moment of vulnerability to reform. The psychological scars lingered, faint, flickering expressions on my skin, visible only in mirrors, embedding stolen deaths once more into my dreams. Lucy recovered her spark. The staff moved on, but I carried the fragment within, a haunting persistence that turned every lost patient into an intimate echo, their final gazes etching into my soul. And now, staring into the clinical mirror, my reflection briefly blanks. A void staring back. In the quiet of the night, I wonder whose expression I'll wear when my time comes. Hey guys, it's Malice here. I really appreciate you sticking around until the end of the story. I'm a one-man operation and trying my best to grow, so if you like what you just heard, please leave me a like. Subscribe if you want to hear more, and please send me any reading requests you might have. I'm always struggling to find new content. Thanks again, and stay scared.